After all the modifications in part 1, all the prepping, priming, prepping, fixing, and priming in part 2, the body was again sanded with 3000 grit to get it extremely smooth. Then all the dust was removed, washed off, and then I blew over the entire body again with just air to remove any of the remaining or loose dust on there. And then I started applying the color. First of all, going over those hard to reach, easy to forget spots, and then moving on to the rest of the body, applying a first light coat, not to go for full coverage, just a nice ground for the second and maybe even third coat to go onto. After hitting up all those hard to reach, easy to forget spots first, I can now move on to applying the main color to the rest of the body. Now with these lighter metallic silver grayish colors, or just any lighter metallic color, it is really important to avoid tiger striping. And tiger striping is just an effect you get if you don't cover it completely or have a couple of streaks that are covered a bit thicker than others. So be very consistent in the thickness you apply to the paint, and also be very aware that you overlap each layer going over the next one and each pass over the next one to the other one as well, in order to not get that tiger striping effect. If you overlap them, you cover it nice and even and don't burst out too much paint all at once, so be very cautious and aware of the amount of paint you open with your trigger to let onto the body. After this first light coat, you can see that the color is covering really nice, really even, and also really quickly, but don't be fooled by that. Just set it aside for 5 minutes, let it cure a bit, and move on to the second coat. Again, going very light as the color covers really quickly. It's not really necessary to go really thick. Go over those hard to reach, easy to forget spots again, and then move on to the rest of the body. Now just continue in the same way you did on the first coat. Don't go really heavy, just keep it light, as and again I mentioned, this color covers really quickly, so no need for a thick coat. After applying the second coat, the color had fully covered. Now you could decide to go for a third and final coat, or just leave it at this like I did, or you could even add a control coat. Now a control coat is just a very light mist coat over the entire body, not focusing on one area in particular, but just spraying randomly to make sure that all the metallic covers are covered all over the place. Now this is not necessary, but it doesn't hurt, and maybe is even a good skill to have for these metallic colors. And even furthermore, this could also help avoid those tiger stripes. Now with that all said and done, I set the body aside for a good hour to dry off, and then I moved on to applying those metal emblems supplied in the kit itself, just cutting them from the sheet and applying them one by one. With all the logos applied all over the place, I could move on to mixing up some clear and applying that to the body as well. Now first off, I'm going to go over the entire body again, as I did take it out of the spray booth and some dust might have fallen onto it, and I don't want that under the clear. So just blow over it and make sure that all that loose or remaining dust is gone, and then you can apply that first light coat of clear. Now just like the primer and color coats, go over those hard to reach, easy to forget spots first, and then move on to the rest of the body. So the first coat is now pretty much applied. You can still see a bit of texture in it, and that is totally fine. This is just the first light tack coat, and that tack coat makes sure that there is a good bond between the color, the clear, and also the second layer of clear, creating an overall stronger paint job and a higher quality finish. So after this first coat, I just top off the airbrush, set that aside, and wait for 5 minutes to give it a bit of flash off time, and then move on to the second coat. Now this second coat is a bit heavier, as we are trying to remove this texture and get a smooth finish. and then I ran out of clear. Not a big deal, just a quick refill in the airbrush and move on where you left off with this second coat. Now in this second coat it turned out pretty good and I was really happy with the result. I just went over it and checked it a couple of times to be sure that it was exactly the way I wanted it to. Found a couple of spots that I was not really happy with, so I added some more clear all over the place and then double checked it again to see if I was finished. And that's it for the second half of coat 2. Now I could have decided to just let it flash off for another 5 minutes after I had finished that second coat, but instead I just took the airbrush out again and hit those couple of spots to not have to go for an entire third coat, but still get the finish I desire. So I just went over a couple of the areas that still had a bit of orange peel, finished it off, and saved a third coat for the entire body, as that was not necessary and it would have built up an extra layer of clear that did not have to be on there. So I saved myself a bit of time and also saved the body from a bit of clear that could have dissolved a couple of details and maybe even filled in some panel lines, and that's not what you want. So by being careful, knowing what you do, and seeing a couple of spots that need fixing, just fixing them quickly before moving on to a third coat is sometimes good enough. After checking over the entire body, I was really happy with the way that it came out. It did not need a third coat, as I did mention that I sprayed a couple of areas and fixed that already. Let it sit in the booth with the booth turned on for about an hour to dry up a bit and not have any dust fall into the wet clear, and then took it out after that hour and let that dry for about 72 hours in my room at room temperature.